On the Mishnah on Daf Kuf Nun Amud Aleph. Sagt the Mishnah, Lo yisker Adam Payalim b'Shabbos. A person should not hire workers on Shabbos. The reason for this Isser is the Gzeira of Chazal, as Rashi brings up over here, the pasuk that we learn out from, Mimtzoi Cheftzicha, that a person should not deal with his own private affairs on Shabbos. Weiter sagt the Mishnah, a person should not tell his friend to hire workers for him on Shabbos. So as Rashi points out, that this is lifnei evil sitting michshel. You're being machshel him and being over this isser. And the Gemara will discuss this. It's pretty obvious that if you can't do it, you shouldn't be allowed to ask your friend to do it for you. Another din says the Mishnah, Ein machshichen ala tchum. You're not allowed to go and stay by the tchum, near the tchum where the person can go till and be there at night. So right after Shabbos, he can go lisker lo poyalim, to hire workers, or lahavi peiris, or to bring in fruits. So he's going to wait there on Shabbos until Matzah Shabbos, or immediately Matzah Shabbos, he'll be able to go and hire the workers he wants, or bring in his fruits. So you're not allowed to go on Shabbos with that purpose for Matzah Shabbos to be able to be close to there. Aval machshechu, a person is allowed to go there near the tchum, to stay there until at night. Lishmeir, to guard peiris, to be able to go and guard his peiris. That's allowed, because on Shabbos you're allowed to do that. Or maybe peiris biyadai, and once he's there for that purpose, he could also come back and bring fruits with him. Even though l'chatchila you're not allowed to go for the purpose of bringing the fruits, but if he went for the purpose to go and guard his fruits, so then he can come back with the peiris as well. Omar Abba Shaul said, Kol shani zakai ba'mirosoi, anything that I'm allowed to say on Shabbos. So Rashi here explains that what Abba Shaul is speaking about is the things that a person is allowed to say is to hire somebody on Shabbos to get something done for you. Even if you're not allowed to hire him to do it on Shabbos, but you're allowed to tell a guy to do it Matzah Shabbos, so you're allowed to, so the Mishnah says further, Rashoy ani lahachshechalav. You're allowed to go and wait there at the Tchum Shabbos to be able to do it right by Matzah Shabbos. We'll see in the Gemara more the pshat and what Abba Shaul says. The Gemara starts off with the first case in the Mishnah, where it said that you're not allowed to hire workers on Shabbos, and you're also not allowed to tell your friend to hire workers. Frag the Gemara, Maishnahu or Maishnachaveirai. Why should there be any difference between yourself or your friend? If you're not allowed to hire workers, it should be obvious that you're not allowed to tell your friend to hire workers. Amar Rav Papa, says Rav Papa, Chaver Nachri. It's talking about a Chaver that's a guy. And the Chiddush in our Mishnah is that you're not allowed to tell the guy to do the malacha, or not malacha, or to hire workers, just like you're not allowed to hire yourself. You're not allowed to tell the guy to hire these workers. Maskefla Rav Ashi, Amira Lanachri, Shvus. Telling a guy not to do something that you're not allowed to do, so we already learned before that telling a guy to do anything that's asr on Shabbos is a shvus. We had the Gemara before. The Gemara brought it up in the case where there's a fire. There's a Mishnah there, but they get a fire. You're not allowed to tell a guy to go in and extinguish the fire. So why over here does the Mishnah have to teach this to me again? Elam Ravashi. So Ravashi says, Afilat Teimeh Chaveira Yisrael. So we can say that when it says in the Mishnah Chaveira, it's talking about your friend the Yid. But the Chiddush in our Mishnah here is as follows. You're not allowed to tell your friend, hire workers for me. You could say to your friend, shall we meet, shall we see each other, that you'll stand with me, you'll remain with me until at night, and then I'll hire you. In other words, he's not saying clearly that he's going to hire him. He's not hiring him clearly on Shabbos. But the Chiddush of the Mishnah was that only if you're telling your friend to hire workers, it's not allowed. But the Chiddush is the diuk. But if you're telling your friend in such a way that he understands that you want to hire him, but you didn't tell it to him explicitly, it's allowed. Sagt the Gemara, Umas Nisan Mani, and according to who? That's what our Mishnah say, follow, Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. It goes with the opinion of Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. The Tanya, we learned in Abraisa. A person should not say to his friend, that it appears that you should stand and wait for me at night, and you're making it clear to him that you want to hire him. Rabbi Shua ben Karcha says, a person is allowed to say to his friend, that you should be with me in the evening that he's going to hire him then. So our Mishnah, the Chiddush was according to the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha. And we paskin like this, heter of Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha. Why does Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha say that this is allowed? If he didn't explicitly say that you're hiring him, but you're making it clear, but not explicitly, it's okay. That you shouldn't take care of your own affairs, but it's only if it's v'daber davar, if you're speaking, if you're verbally clearly saying it. Dibor asor, saying it is not allowed, but hiror mutter, to think of these matters is allowed. So in this case, that you didn't say it clearly, it's allowed. Rami le Ravacha bar Ravuna le Rave. Ravacha bar Ravuna asks Rave, Mi yom Rabbi Yechanan. Did Rabbi Yechanan say that dibur asur, but hiror mutter, that it's not allowed to speak, you're not allowed to speak these matters on Shabbos, but to think of your own private affairs and your own business on Shabbos is allowed? Alma. So we see from here that hiror lav kidibur dami, that speaking and thinking are not the same. So thinking is not equivalent to speaking. But the question is, Rabbi Baba Chana said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, and we learned this in the Gemara in Brachas, a person is allowed to think divrei Torah anywhere, chutz mi beis hamerchatz and mi beis hakisei, not in a bathhouse and not in a beis hakisei. So you see that hiror is not allowed because it's equivalent to speaking divrei Torah, which is not allowed. So hiror is not allowed either. And for the Gemara, no. Speaking is not equivalent to thinking, not the same thing. Or thinking, rather, is not equivalent to speaking. But Shani Hassam, over there, the reason why you're not allowed to think Divrei Torah in a Beis HaMerchatz or in a Beis HaKisei, the Be'inon v'hoya machanecha kodesh v'leka. The Eibusha says that Divrei Torah should only be in a place where you have your holy encampments. And over here, in the case where he's thinking Divrei Torah in a place where it's not holy, not befitting for speaking, for thinking even Divrei Torah, it's not allowed. So as Rashi explains, in this pasuk, it doesn't mention anything about speaking. It just says that your machnas should be kodesh. And says Rashi, Yidden are always thinking divrei Torah. So that means that thinking divrei Torah should only be in a place where it's machanecha kodesh. Not only b'negeh to dibur, even b'negeh to hirur. But here, in our Gemara, hirur and dibur are not the same thing. The issur of not dealing with mundane activities on Shabbos is only if you're speaking about it, not if you're thinking of it. Frag the Gemara, but hocha nami, ksiv, in this very pasuk here where it talks about v'haya machanecha kodesh, it does mention dibur, because it says, lo yiroeh b'cha ervas davar. So it mentions the expression of davar. So why do we say that this includes even hirur? Answers the Gemara, hahu, that pasuk of lo yiroeh b'cha ervas davar is coming to teach me a completely different thing. Hahu mi Rav Yehuda, that's teaching me the din of Rav Yehuda. The Rav Yehuda, akum arum, a guy that's not dressed, also likres kriya shma kenegda. You're not allowed to read kriya shma in his presence. Okay, so this is a different halacha that it's teaching me. Benegeh to not thinking divrei Torah, which includes not only speaking but even thinking, that we learn from the first half of the pasuk v'haya machanecha kodesh. Benegeh to saying kriya shma in the presence of somebody that's not dressed, there it says davar, and that's only benegeh to saying kriya shma. Frag the Gemara, my irya akum. This statement here of Rav Yehuda, why did he say only in front of a guy that's not dressed? Afili Yisrael nami, it should be true about a yid as well. Says the Gemara, loy mi baya kama. He's telling you a chiddush. Loy mi baya, needless to say Yisrael, that in front of a yid that's not dressed, you're not allowed to say kriya shma, the asor, avol akum. But when it comes to a guy, kivin d'chsivbe. Since it says regarding goyim, asher psar chamayrim besaram, their flesh is like the flesh of a donkey. So ein mishaper dami. So I would say that even if they're not dressed, it's okay. You're allowed to say kriya shma. Kamash malon. That's why he mentions specifically even a guy that you're not allowed to say kriya shma in front of a guy that's not dressed. Frag the Gemara, maybe I should make this distinction between a guy and a yid that are not dressed. Makra, but the pasuk says, even regarding a guy before Matan Torah, ve'ervas aviem loy ro. Over there in the story of Noach, so it refers to the erva as ervas aviem loy ro. So we see that even a guy that's not dressed is considered to be an union of erva. The Gemara comes back now to the halacha that we learned in our Mishnah, that you're not allowed to speak about your business matters on Shabbos. Memtzai chefzecha. Fragt the Gemara, v'dibor mi aser. Is it forbidden to speak even b'dibor of these things? Rav Chisda and Rav Amnuna Damri Tarvayu. Rav Chisda and Rav Amnuna both said, Cheshbainis shel mitzvah, a person that's making calculations b'dibur about a thing that pertains to a mitzvah, mutter l'chashvan b'Shabbos. You're allowed to make this cheshbainis on Shabbos. Rabbi Lazar, another thing Rabbi Lazar said, Poiskim tzedakah la'aniyim b'Shabbos. You're allowed to establish tzedakah, set amounts of tzedakah for aniyim on Shabbos. The third thing, you're allowed to take care of matters of the life, pikuach nefesh and Shabbos, so pikuach rabbin b'Shabbos, and also to take care of matters that pertain to the public. So those things also rise to the level of a mitzvah, and they're allowed to be taken care of on Shabbos. You're allowed to go to shul to take care and to speak about matters that are pertain to the rabbim on Shabbos. Another thing Rabbi Shmuel ben Achmeni said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, you're allowed to go to these places. Rashi says these are places which are palaces that government officials are there. And you're allowed to go meet them on Shabbos. Other Rishonim say this refers to stadiums and other kinds of theaters that Goyim are there to go and take care of certain things on Shabbos. L'fakech al iskei rabbin b'Shabbos, to take care of things that pertain to the public on Shabbos. And yet another thing we learned, v'tana debei menashe. Mishatchen ala tinoikis la'ores b'Shabbos. You're allowed to speak about shidduchim of children to make the edison on Shabbos. Valatinik, and you're allowed to speak about the children, l'lamdei sefer, to arrange for them to have a teacher to teach them. And also, v'lamdei yomnis, to arrange for somebody to teach them a craft. So, the question is that in all of these things we see that you could speak about chefzecha, about all of these different things that you have to take care of, even on Shabbos. So how could the Mishnah say that you shouldn't hire workers on Shabbos to speak about chefzecha, about your needs, about your own affairs on Shabbos? Answers the Gemara, it's not the same thing. You shouldn't be occupied with your affairs and speak about them on Shabbos. If it's your affairs, it's not allowed. But if it's heavenly affairs, if it pertains to a mitzvah, or pertains to the public that is on the level of a mitzvah, all of these things are allowed. Which includes, by the way, also to hire somebody to teach your child a craft, because if you don't teach him a craft, as Rashi here brings from the Gemara and Kedushin, that if you don't teach a child a craft, so then malamdei listus, he could end up stealing. So therefore, it's also for the purpose of a mitzvah. Sagt the Gemara weiter, Rabbi Yudah Shmuel, cheshbainis shel maloch. Kinds of calculations which a person is saying, but it's things that has nothing to do with him. He's just speaking about something which is hypothetical, that if someone would do like this, the cheshbon would be like that, but has nothing to do with him. That's how Rashi explains it here. Or v'shal mabekach, things that have no significance to him because they're things of the past. Mutter l'chashbon b'Shabbos. You're allowed to speak of these cheshbainis on Shabbos. Tanya nami hachi, we learned this in a brayso as well. Cheshbainis she'avru, cheshbainis of the past. V'sha'asidin liyais, cheshbainis about the future, also. Those things you're not allowed to speak of on Shabbos. L'chashbon, again, she'asidin liyais, also l'chashbon. You're not allowed to make these cheshbainis on Shabbos. V'shel maloch, if you're speaking about things that have nothing to do with you. V'shel mabekach, or things of the past. Mutter l'chashbon, you're allowed to speak of these cheshbainis on Shabbos. Now there seems to be a clear contradiction in this brayso. In the beginning it said that cheshbainis of the past are not allowed, and here it's saying mabekach, which means cheshbainis of the past are allowed. The Gemara is going to address that stira in a moment. But first the Gemara brings a stira from another brayso regarding this. Veramino, I'll ask you a question from another brayso. What does it say? There, cheshvin cheshbainis she'einan tzrichin. You're allowed to speak of calculations that have no need for you, no relevance. But you're not allowed to speak of calculations that are relevant, that you need for them on Shabbos. So what are the examples for this? A person can say to his friend, or haskarti al sadazu. This is the amount of workers that I hired for this field. This is the amount of money that I spent on this house here. So these are things in the past that are not relevant anymore. So that's allowed. Aval lo yoimaloi kach v'kach hoitzeisi v'kach v'kach ani osad lo hoitzi. But you shouldn't be speaking of this in a context where you're not just talking about the past, but you're also talking about the future. And this is what I still have to spend on this, so these are things that are still relevant to you, so you're not allowed to speak them on Shabbos. So what do you see over here? The cheshbainis of the past, you're allowed to speak them on Shabbos. And in the Braisa before that we just mentioned, it said in the Reisha of that Braisa, that cheshbainis she'avru, from the past, asal l'chashva. You're not allowed to say these cheshbainis on Shabbos. So there's a contradiction here. So the Gemara says, Ulatai meich, and according to you, you're asking this question, Kashil achi gufa. Take a look at that first Braisa that we quoted before. As I pointed out, there's a contradiction there. In the first part of the Braisa, it says that cheshbainis of the past are not allowed. And then it said, V'shel mabakach mutar l'chayshvan, which refers also to cheshbainis about the past. And it says that you're allowed to speak of these cheshbainis. So there's a stira in the Braisa itself. So again, there's a question there in that Braisa itself. Elo, what's the answer? The ikke agra da gira. In the case where it says that you're not allowed to speak about cheshbainis of the past, that's when there's still money that you owe these workers that you have to pay them. So although the work that they did is in the past, but it's still relevant for you now because you didn't pay them fully yet. Again, the ikke agra da gira gabe, there's still money that you have to pay them, they're still hired for you. And the leka agre da gira gabe. And in the case where you're allowed to speak about the past, is because you fully paid them, it's done, and you're fully paid, so therefore it's something that's totally in the past, it's not relevant anymore for now, and therefore you're allowed to speak of this. Zok to Gemara, the next thing it said in the Mishnah was, Ein machshichen. You're not allowed to go on Shabbos to wait by the tchum until it's dark in order to be able to go there immediately to go and deliver in fruits, or what did it say? To hire workers to bring in fruits, right? But you are allowed to go there if it's just for the purpose to be able to be there to guard your peitis, because that's something you're allowed to do on Shabbos. So the Gemara starts with a story. Taner Rabbanon Maise b'chassid echad. There was an incident with one chassid. Shenifritz aloi peretz b'toich sadeyu. That he had a hole, it was breached in his field, in a wall in his field. And he decided that he wants to fence it off. And then he remembered that it was Shabbos. So he forgot originally that it was Shabbos, and he was thinking about this. He was planning on fencing this off. And he remembered it's Shabbos, and then he realized he shouldn't be thinking of this. And now this chassid held back, and he never fenced this off. So this is a story with a chassid, because as we learned before, b'nigeya to the halacha in the Mishnah that you're not allowed to take care of cheftzecha on Shabbos, that only refers to dibur. But over here, this chassid wanted to separate himself from this melacha to such an extent that even if he was just thinking about doing it on Shabbos, and it was b'sheigig, he forgot that it was Shabbos, but yet he was machbid on himself and he never fenced off that area afterwards. What happened? A miracle occurred. And a caper bush grew in that place. And a caper bush is a bush, we once learned about this in Gemara and Brachas, that has fruits, it has berries on it, it has shoots that you can use as well. It has a lot of uses to it. And from that tree, he had enough parnasa for himself and for the people of his house. This story that the Gemara brings over here is also brought in a little bit of a different context in the Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi discusses the whole sugya that we spoke about over here, that you're not allowed to speak about your own chavatzecha, your own personal affairs on Shabbos. And then the Yerushalmi adds that we see that a chassid was careful, not only not to speak about his own affairs, but even not to think of his own affairs. That's how far his hiris went, and he didn't want to do the begaider, this breach on Shabbos. So there's a very lengthy sikha from the Rebbe about this, in Lekut HaSichos Chelik Yud Aleph, page 80 and onward. And there the Rebbe makes the point that Minat Torah, the main Isser of Malacha on Shabbos is B'maisa. To rest B'maisa, the external part of the person, the activity, that's the Ikar Adin Minat Torah. Then Chacham wa Meisif, that Shmiras Shabbos includes something that's even deeper, even V'daber Davar. Even not to even speak about your mundane activity. That's a further extent of a person's Shmiras Shabbos that goes even deeper to really rest on Shabbos. But a chassid that's connected to the Eibishter on a deeper level, so he's going to rest on Shabbos even b'machshava. by the Eibishter. When the Eibishter created the world, the Eibishter rested b'dibur and the Eibishter rested b'machshava. So although the machshava of a person doesn't at all compare to the machshava of the Eibishter, but a chassid that rises up to this level of being a chassid and is completely one and unified with the Eibishter, so he rests on Shabbos even with his machshava. And that's the story over here with this chassid, that it's telling you, at least in the context, the way it's brought in the Yerushalmi, that he was careful not only b'dibur, but even b'machshava, to rest on Shabbos even b'machshava. Sagt the Gemara weiter, Rav Yehuda Mashmuel, Mutter Adam lo yimel chaveroi, a person is allowed to say to his friend, L'karach pleini ani haylech l'macha, I'm going to another city tomorrow. So even though l'chayri he's speaking about something that you're not allowed to speak about on Shabbos, because this is a chilul Shabbos, so it's part of Memtzai Cheftzecha, but this is allowed. Why? She'im yesh burganin haylech, because going to that other city, even though it's going out of your tchum, and you're doing something which is asur on Shabbos, however, it's not something that's going to be asur in all circumstances. If there are burganin are huts. If you have a hut once every 70 amos, as Rashi here brings from the Gemara in Eidavin, if you have a hut once every 70 amos, it's considered to be like an extension of your city, and you're allowed to continue walking there. Within a city, you're allowed to walk as far as you want. But even outside of the city, as long as there's huts every 70 amos, you're allowed to continue walking. So what the Gemara is saying over here is, if you're speaking about something, that there's a certain circumstance that it would be allowed, so you're allowed to speak about this on Shabbos. The only thing you're not allowed to speak about on Shabbos is if it's something that you're planning and doing and you're talking about that has no heta to be done on Shabbos. But if it has a heta, if there's a way, there's a circumstance that there would be a heta for it, it's allowed. Says the Gemara Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, Ein machshichin al tchum, you shouldn't go and wait till it's dark by Matzah Shabbos. For what purpose? Lisker payalim, to hire workers, olahavi peiris, or to bring in the peiris from your field. So now the Gemara analyzes this. So to say that you're not allowed to, on Shabbos, go and wait there in order to be able to go and hire your workers, the b'Shabbos le'motzi ogar, this is something that on Shabbos is completely not allowed, midrabanon, because of Memtzei Cheftzecha, you're not allowed to hire those workers. So therefore, you're not allowed to go and prepare and stand there on Shabbos for that purpose. There's no circumstances would be allowed, so on Shabbos you're not allowed to do that either. But if the person's going there on Shabbos in order to be able to be there to bring in the fruits, why is bringing in the fruits, even if you're bringing it from a place which is outside the tchum, why is that a problem to go and prepare for this on Shabbos? Leime, why shouldn't we say, she'im yesham mechitzis, maybe. If you're bringing it a place on the outside in the field, or it's in a karmelis, or it's in a shus harabim, but if you would have the proper mechitzis, it would be allowed. So if what we said before is true, that any time there's any circumstance that it would be allowed, so you can speak about this on Shabbos, you can prepare for this on Shabbos. So over here in this case, there's a circumstance that it's allowed. So why are you not allowed to go on Shabbos to prepare to be there, lahavi peiris? Answers the Gemara, you know what we're talking about? Mishkachas law, our Mishnah is speaking about a case where this totally not allowed in any circumstance to bring in these fruits. But peiris hamuchabarim, speaking about peiris that are still attached to the ground. So you're preparing for something that there's no circumstance this would be allowed to be done on Shabbos. Fragt the Gemara from another Braise, Tani Rabbi Shia said, Ein machshichin al atchum, Lahavi teven v'kash. You're not allowed to go out to stay for the dark, Motzei Shabbos, to bring in teven and kash, to bring in straw. So teven is processed straw and kash is not processed straw. So bishloi mekash, when it says you shouldn't go there to bring in the kash, the unprocessed straw, so mishkachas lo b'mechuba, we could say we're talking actually about straw that's still attached to the ground. So there's no circumstance this would be allowed on Shabbos, so it's not something you can prepare for, speak about, or go for that purpose on Shabbos itself. Elo teven, if we're talking about processed straw, which is obviously cut from the ground, heichi mishkachas lo, why shouldn't you be allowed to go there and be there on Shabbos to be able to bring it in right after Shabbos? This is something that there's definitely a circumstance you could bring it in on Shabbos. Like we said before, make a mechitza and you could bring it in. Answers the Gemara, betivne sarya. We're talking here about straw that's spoiled, that has a foul smell. It's not fit to be moved, to be touched on Shabbos, or to be moved on Shabbos because it's muktzeh. So because it's muktzeh and you can't in any circumstance move it on Shabbos, so therefore it's not allowed to go there on Shabbos, to be there for the dark, to be able to bring it in. Tashama, the Gemara brings a raya from another case, and this is actually the next Mishnah we'll be learning. Machshichin ala tchum lefakeach al iskei kala. You're allowed to go and remain for the dark by the Tchum Shabbos to be able to take care of the needs of a kala, val iskei ameis, and to take care of things that are needed for a dead person. That's the Mishnah. So that is allowed. So the Gemara says we could be medayik from this Mishnah. Al iskei kala umeis in. To go there, to remain there for the dark, for the purpose of a kala or a mace, that's allowed. But al iskei acher, to go there for the purpose of somebody else, loy, that's not allowed. So now, says the Gemara, let's see what kind of a case are we talking about. Again, we're discussing over here the question, when you get to whether you can prepare to do something on Shabbos, or speak about something on Shabbos, if it's regarding something where there's a certain circumstance that would be allowed to be done on Shabbos. So now let's look at these cases here. Bishloima acher dum yedekala, the diuk that we made regarding the kala, that for the kala it's allowed, but for somebody else, the same that you would do for a kala is not allowed to go there for someone else. What's that case? Mishkachas lo lemizgala asa. We're talking about cutting off hadassim branches, which was used usually by a wedding celebration. They would prepare nice hadassim branches for the kala. So that's something which in no circumstance you're allowed to cut hadassim branches on Shabbos. So therefore it's saying that for a kala, they gave a special heter that you can go out there to be there at night to be able to prepare it for the kala. But for somebody else, since there's no circumstances would be allowed to be done on Shabbos, so you can't even go there on Shabbos to be there at night. That's understood. Elo meis, but when we said that for a meis you're not allowed to go, so my niu. So what are we talking about here? Lo haviloi aron v'tachrichen. Aren't we talking about to bring an aron and the aron for the mace and the tachrichen for the mace? Ukatani mace in, and the Mishnah is saying that there's a heter to go there to be there for the purpose of a mace. Aval acher loy, but for somebody else to do something similar to this is not allowed. Now why not? Why aren't you allowed to go out to somebody else for something similar to this? Leme, why shouldn't we say she'im yesham mechitzis? Maybe if there's mechitzas there, he would be able to carry in these tachrichim or an aron. There is a circumstance that this would be allowed. So why are we saying that for somebody else you're not allowed to go there for this purpose? You're going there for a purpose of something that there's a circumstance that this could be done on Shabbos. And we said before, anything that there's any way this could be done on Shabbos, you're allowed to go there and prepare to go there even on Shabbos itself. Answers the Gemara, no. Mishkachas law, even by the case of the mace, there is a case where it's something that there's no circumstance that would be allowed on Shabbos. What is that? Lemizgale glima. To cut the tachrichim, to prepare and cut the tachrichim to prepare for him, which is mamash malacha, that's something we're saying that still they gave a heter to be able to walk out for the mace to be prepared there right after Shabbos. But for someone else, you're doing something which is no circumstances would be allowed, so they didn't give you the heter. So the conclusion of the Gemara is, and this is the halacha in Shulchan Aruch, that you're allowed to go out and prepare to be there on time, right Motzei Shabbos, as long as it's something that there's some circumstances would be allowed on Shabbos. Only something that there's no circumstances would be allowed on Shabbos, then you're not allowed to walk out to be prepared there for Motzei Shabbos. The next thing we learned in the Mishnah, Avo Machshichin, you can go out there to be there ready to go and guard your fruits. Since this is something that can be done on Shabbos, there's no problem to go out there right by the end of the Tchum to be able to go there right after Shabbos. Frak the Gemara. So he's going there, now he's out in the field and he's waiting there for Motzei Shabbos. Does that mean Va'afa gav d'loi avdol? So he did not make any avdala yet, and he's still allowed to go out there and take care of his fruits and go guard the fruits. A person is not allowed to attend to his own needs on Motzei Shabbos before he makes avdala. And as Rashi here explains, the point is that a person has to make Havdalah in order to accompany the queen or the king, which is Shabbos, and in order for the covet of accompanying the king, you're not allowed to do any malacha Motzei Shabbos before you make Havdalah. Are we going to say that this person is out in the field, but he davened Shmei Nesra, and he said the Havdalah in davening, in the bracha of Atachainen. So he did say Havdalah in davening, so therefore he can go out, do what he wants to there. But for the Gemara, Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, Hamavdil betfila, even after you make Havdalah and davening, tzarich sheyavdal ala kais. You still have to make Havdalah on a kais before you go ahead and do malacha. That's the assumption of the Gemara right now. That if you have to make, if you're not yaitza with the Havdalah and davening, and you in addition have to make Havdalah on a kais, so you shouldn't be allowed to do any malacha before then. The Havdalah ala kais. Is that the pshat here in the Mishnah? That this person maybe did make Havdalah ala kais? But why would we say that? Doesn't make any sense. Kais basada mi ikke. If you're saying that he's waiting out there in the field, does he have any kais? Does he have any wine out in the field to be able to make Havdalah? So our question is, how could this person go out and do what he has to before he makes Havdalah on a kais? Answers the Gemara, Tigmer Rav Nosson bar Ami kamei de Rove, bein agita is shonu. We're talking about a person that's there out in the field in the time period between when they're pressing the wine and there is a lot of grapes in the field and there's wine that he can get his hands on over there, and he did end up making Havdalah even in the field on a kais of wine, and therefore he can go and do what he has to. Yeah, so we are talking about a person that was in the field and he already made Havdalah in his davening, he made Havdalah on a kais, and that's why he can go do what he has to. Amalei Rababa Rababa says to Ravashi, B'man Rava Amrinon, in Marava they say as follows. This is what they would say. Hamavdil ben kodesh l'chayil. They would just say Hamavdil ben kodesh l'chayil, even if you didn't say Shmai Nesra or you didn't make Havdalah on a kais. They would say, like we say today, Baruch Hamavdil ben kodesh l'chayil, Vav Dinon tzarchen, and they do their needs. Omar Ravashi also said, Ki avine bei Rav Kahana Ava Oma. They would say Hamavdil ben kodesh l'chayil, Umisaltinon silti, and he would go and cut wood. So we see that he could just say Hamavdil ben kodesh l'chayil, and that's enough. So therefore, the pshat in the Mishnah here, the person that was out in the field, we don't have to say that he was punked in a time where he has the wine available for him in the field. No, he didn't make Havdalah on a kais, but just saying Hamavdil ben kodesh l'chayil is allowed. And this is the psak halacha that's brought in Shulchan Aruch, that we could say Hamavdil ben kodesh l'chayil and it's allowed. But the Alter Rebbe says in Shulchan Aruch that b'diavad, if you don't say Hamavdil ben kodesh l'chayil, there are certain malachas that are not such a big tirche that are still allowed. Only malachas that are a really big tirche are not going to be allowed, but the Alter Rebbe says you shouldn't rely on that. But if you see somebody that's doing malacha without saying Hamavdil ben kodesh l'chayil, and it's not something which is a very big tirche, so then they have what to rely upon. However, the Alter Rebbe says you should teach everybody, the men and the women that don't come to shul and they're not going to be davening Shmai Nesra, that before they do any malacha Motzei Shabbos, they should say Hamavdil ben kodesh l'chayil.